I was planning to make a video talking about the missing side quest in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but certain developments have been pissing me off, so I decided to talk about them. What developments am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about all the crap that HBO Max has been pulling. Warner Media has been releasing all of their recent movies on their streaming service known as HBO Max, and it's been a disaster. It's not a smart move to invest so heavily in streaming, and this system has been damaging the film industry as it fumbles all over itself. HBO Max's system is a moronic social stunt that will backfire faster than a trigger-happy serial killer. Oh, what's that? You want to know why HBO Max is shooting themselves in the foot? Well then buckle up as I try to explain how HBO Max sucks, and the general problem with this simultaneous streaming bullcrap. And the best place to start is with Netflix. You see, Netflix has steadily become an entertainment juggernaut over the past couple of years, and all these other companies were jealous and wanted their streaming service fame. So, like a demanding little child who sees a friend's toy and wants one for themselves, a whole bunch of companies have been trying to make their own streaming services to compete with Netflix. But the most important ones to focus on here are Disney Plus and HBO Max. Disney Plus was launched by Disney, as the name implies, and HBO Max was launched by Warner Media. These became more prominent when the pandemic began, and everyone was stuck inside on their computers watching videos, or in my case, making my first video, but for the most part, everyone was watching The Mandalorian or Stranger Things, or whatever else you were watching. However, Disney and Warner Media had a unique issue that they needed to deal with. The movies they had planned to release in theaters couldn't be released in theaters because a majority of the theaters were shut down. And if these films were released into the few theaters that were still open, they would have become legendary flops, comparable to a block of cement floating in water. It would have sunk. And so, Warner Media and Disney decided to release these movies onto their streaming service. The live-action Mulan movie was released with an additional $30 fee. Actually, keep this premiere access fee in the back of your mind because I will be returning to it later. HBO Max was launched on May 27th, and man was it rushed into distribution. Actually, allow me to go on a bit of a tangent here. You see, Warner Media was so desperate to get this streaming platform out there as quickly as possible that the service is still scrambling to fix all the bugs that came with it. But none are as bad as the PS4 version. If you decide to stream HBO Max on PS4, be prepared for atrocious buffering times, constant crashes, and frame rates similar to a slideshow. Good grief, if I wanted this experience, I would have played Cyberpunk 2077. This streaming service just feels like it was slapped together overnight. I know they were missing all those hungry consumers during lockdown, but this is pathetic. And because of that, HBO Max started out behind their competition. But you see, the minds behind Warner Media had a plan to get ahead fast. Their plan was to gut all their movies they had planned to release in theaters and use them as marketing for HBO Max. They then released Wonder Woman 1984 in theaters and HBO Max the same day in December. Ever since then, Warner Media has been releasing all their movies that were meant for theaters on HBO Max the same day, and they apparently are planning to continue to do this. This is stupid. HBO Max alone cannot reliably support a system like this on a financial level. Keep in mind, these streaming services need content to bring people in to buy their product. And guess what? Those shows that they put on those streaming platforms aren't cheap to make. Just take a look at Netflix. In order to make all those movies, shows, and whatever else, Netflix needed to borrow money from all over the place, and they got into a lot of debt. Do you know how much debt they went into? I'll give you a second to guess. Are you ready? The answer is $15 billion. Sure, the pandemic helped them and they were able to pay off $5 billion of that debt, but that still leaves them with $10 billion more to pay off! Holy crap! How do you live with yourself when you have that big of a tab to pay off? And how did they blow so much of their money on so many garbage movies and series? Look, the point I'm trying to make here is that Netflix wasn't financially stable until just recently. They blew so much money on these shows for such a long time, even though they really couldn't afford it. So you can imagine how disastrous it would be for HBO Max, thinking that this streaming setup could solve their financial problems. And I have an idea what you might be saying right now. It's something around the likes of, well, maybe HBO Max has enough subscribers to cover the costs to make these movies. And to that I say, no! HBO Max's numbers aren't even close to Netflix or even Disney+. Netflix has about 209 million subscribers worldwide, while Disney Plus has about 116 million subscribers worldwide. And guess how many subscribers HBO Max has? 67 million. Good grief, they haven't even reached the 9-digit mark like Netflix or Disney Plus. HBO Max, or should I say Warner Media, does not have the numbers to afford to do stuff like this. It's like getting your paycheck and flushing it down the toilet. But you know what? It somehow gets worse, because this system of releasing movies both on HBO Max and theaters is damaging a lot of the industry. Do you remember back when this simultaneous streaming bullcrap was first announced? Well, if you don't, allow me to refresh your memory, because it pissed off a lot of people. Warner Brothers was going to release Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune on HBO Max. However, Legendary Pictures was livid about this decision. They were so overcome with anger that they were getting ready to sue Warner Media. If you don't know, Legendary Pictures is the company that financed most of the production for Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune. And by sending all these movies to HBO Max, Legendary could be potentially screwed out of hundreds of millions of dollars. So yeah, they were really not happy. But it's not just businessmen who hate this system. An enormous amount of filmmakers are speaking out about how awful this system is. Denis Villeneuve has been constantly speaking out about HBO Max and how they are gutting these movies to advertise for HBO Max. Christopher Nolan also has been speaking out against HBO Max's actions. Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman movies, said that putting Wonder Woman 1984 on HBO Max was a heartbreaking experience. In fact, Denis Villeneuve, the director of the upcoming Dune movie, has been especially upset about Dune coming to HBO Max. Denis Villeneuve tailor-made this new movie to be best experienced in theaters. And speaking of movie theaters, the people who are suffering the most from this HBS Max are the movie theaters who play these movies. Because of the pandemic, a lot of movie theaters had to be shut down, and there are some that have not reopened. Over the course of 2021, they have been trying to open back up, but things like HBO Max have made it increasingly difficult to do so. Now then, at the beginning of this year, this system wasn't as devastating. Godzilla vs. Kong was a massive success, and reports showed that the streaming performance and the number of people watching these movies in theaters was about the same. And then, The Suicide Squad came out. The Suicide Squad turned out to be the second most streamed movie that HBO Max has had on an opening weekend. But that success was not shared with movie theaters. The Suicide Squad was a box office disaster, and it's questionable if this movie was successful at all because of the jacked numbers from HBO Max. In fact, the atrocious performance of the Suicide Squad was the inciting incident I was talking about that spurred me to make this video, because they're hurting my movie theater! You know what? Let me start over with this. You see, I worked at the movie theater, actually 2 movie theaters. I got my first movie theater job in the middle of 2020, so as you can imagine, it had to be shut down because we went into lockdown. In fact, I was on my second shift at that theater when the news came in that we were going to shut down. Yeah, it sucked, but it got worse. When we finally reopened a few months later, attendance was abysmal. Every movie studio was pushing the release dates for their movies back further and further. And after a few months of this, in the fall of 2020, the news once again came in that we would be shutting down once again. But this time, it was due to low attendance. I was heartbroken, because working at the movie theater was a dream job for me. And that movie theater that I was working at wouldn't open up until May of the next year. I then suffered the rest of 2020 working at Hobby Lobby, But then I got a different movie theater job at the beginning of 2021, and it was fantastic. Sure, I had to clean up popcorn spills, and the food that I would get on my breaks tasted like cardboard, but dang it, it was a fantastic job! I worked there from February all the way to August, when I decided to go back to college. And I had to watch as no one came to see The Suicide Squad. It was horrible to watch this happen, because it felt like I was back at the first movie theater job, the one that got shut down by low attendance. The one shift I had that week was dead silent, and on that day, I had to get sent home early, along with 2 other employees, because they didn't have enough business to pay us. So yeah, I have more reason than most to despise HBO Max. Fortunately for movie theaters, Free Guy came out the week after this disaster, and it has been a box office success, proving that there is still money to be made in movie theaters. Movie theaters have been struggling to stay open during this time, and a lot of those theaters had to close down permanently. And for some reason, HBO Max is advertising these movies as streaming on HBO Max, and the advertising has been outrageous. You know, this is actually something that the Disney Plus Premier Access was good for. If you don't know, a lot of Disney movies were put on Disney Plus and in theaters. However, the Disney Plus version came with a Premier Access, which cost an additional $30. But funnily enough, that $30 fee drove a lot of people back to the movie theaters because they weren't willing to pay the $30 fee. Disney's Premier Access actually ended up helping the movie theaters, and I can't tell you how good that is. I have a friend who told me that going to the movie theater is an experience, and he's not wrong about that. It's fun to schedule events with your friends and go to watch some awesome movies on the silver screen. And let's face it, that giant screen is way cooler and more epic than any TV or computer screen you have at home. And I'm not the only one who wants people to come back to the movies. A huge portion of the filmmakers who are working hard these days are trying to bring people back to the theater. And I have an idea what you're typing in the comments right now. It's probably something like, "Oh, but after 30 days, those movies come off HBO Max, and the theaters will have the movie all to themselves." Do you have a few screws loose? It's well known that a majority of a film's profit is made in the first few weeks of its release. And even when the movie is dropped off HBO Max, no one is going to the theaters to watch those movies. I know, because I've watched it happen. It's clear that people don't know how bad the system is. All those comments from YouTubers saying to watch this movie on HBO Max, or that one friend in your friend group who watched In the Heights and The Suicide Squad on HBO Max. Seriously, Jack, I was working at the movie theater. I could have gotten you and your girlfriend in there for free. But back to the rest of the world, it's clear that the majority of the people out there don't understand how much this hurts the movie theaters and the people making these movies. And when filmmakers then speak out against the system, they are then told by the internet that they don't understand this is good, although it really isn't. And to all those Dune-obsessed pricks out there, Denis Villeneuve has been openly opposed to this system since Warner Media started this travesty. Maybe I was a little too hard on this guy the last time I talked about him. Regardless, unless Warner Media is willing to indemnify these filmmakers in the movie theaters they've decided to screw over, there is no way I will ever support HBO Max. So yeah, HBO Max is a service that thrives on sacrificing the filmmakers that they hire, eviscerate the movie theaters they have for the sake of marketing their streaming service, and if things keep going the way the Suicide Squad went, it will be detrimental to movie theaters who have been struggling to stay open and filmmakers who have worked so hard to make these movies. Have a nice day or night depending on what time you are watching this, and bye! I'm going to go watch a movie that's not on my computer screen in order to support the movie theaters. So long!